My name is Whitney Fail. I am a Truckee resident. I'm a long-time secondary social studies history teacher. And I've been asked to facilitate this town hall meeting tonight. Tonight is all about you guys participating in the democracy, practicing your civic virtue. I applaud you for showing up tonight. Good job. This meeting is really about you meeting a candidate for Congress and becoming more informed so that you can make informed decisions. That's all part of the democratic process. So good job. You get to ask questions to find out more about Regina Bateson. And if you have questions, there's plenty of cards and pens for you to write them down at any time. If you think of them in halfway through, write them down. We'll come and collect them. And hopefully we'll get to all the questions. We'll be taking questions online as well. I just wanted to say, I just wanted to quote a social studies guru you've probably never heard of. His name's Walter Parker. But he did a lot of research about high school students and how they discuss things in the classroom. And my favorite quote of his that I have on a little post-it note near my desk is that discussions are about insight, not victory. So we'll just keep that in mind tonight. I just wanted to say when I first met Regina, it was at a house party right at the beginning when no candidates were coming out yet. I was kind of talking to my friends, panicking, like, who's going to run for Congress? Maybe I'll run. Someone's going to run. And so a friend of mine in that panic moment said, oh no, there's this woman, Regina Bateman, she's going to run, and she's Bateson, sorry. She's going to run, and she wants to talk to us. Come over. So I did, and I was blown away. First of all, I was like, oh, I could never do that. I love highly intelligent women, and she is one. So that's a plus. And she's just so passionate and dedicated to running for Congress. It's amazing. I love the fact that she grew up in Roseville, California. I love the fact that she's a professor of political science. We have that sort of in common, that background. So she just spoke to me, and she's just so into answering questions and meeting with people in this format, and I love that too. It's just so democratic. So we're going to get right to it, and she is not going to shy away from any hard questions, and she's going to be as candid as possible. So please welcome Regina Bateson.
All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. Most of you know I'm Regina Bateson from Roseville. Really proud to be running the strongest grassroots campaign in this district against Tom McClintock. And thanks to our hundreds of volunteers, we're laying the groundwork to go beat him in November, which I think is very doable. Just real quickly, echoing some of Whitney's comments about accountability and transparency, you know, I wanted to say that I'm very realistic about the fact that, of course, we need to get rid of McClintock. Of course, there's a very different policy agenda that I pursue if elected. But, you know, as a freshman in Congress, your powers are a little bit limited. But here's something that I think we could change from one day to the next. And that's the way our current representative treats his constituents, or in the future, her constituents. You know, it was really going to a Tom McClintock town hall last spring and seeing how he treated his constituents so disrespectfully, so dismissively, with a callousness that I've never seen from another elected official. That was what pushed me over the edge toward doing this. And so now I've made some really specific commitments to the district. If I was elected, I would hold 10 town halls a year. We're kicking it off a little bit early because we've been holding a series of them now while I'm still a candidate. I would do at least one in each of our counties. And so that means that Truckee, being the part of Nevada County that's in our district, would definitely get at least one town hall per year, and certainly more visits and a lot of engagement. And some of you might know McClintock hasn't had anything like a town hall or a big public event here in years. maybe because he knows he's so far out of step with his constituents. So we would certainly have much better engagement with constituents. I would also open 2 offices in our district because our district is very large. And right now, some people are 4 hours away or more from McClintock's only office in Roseville. You know, and we've got a lot of seniors. We have one of the highest percentage of veterans in our district, of any district in California. There's more than 54,000 veterans. And so we have a lot of people who just need help. I mean, need constituent services in that very nonpartisan way to make sure that they're getting connected with the federal benefits that they need. And that matters if someone's application gets lost. When I was in the Foreign Service, we had that experience sometimes, you know, that someone's visa application would have been pending for years. Things do go wrong in bureaucracy sometimes, and it's a congressional inquiry that makes you jump to and tear your office apart and move furniture and move heaven and earth to go find that lost application and get a concrete answer within 24 or 48 hours because, you know, those congressional inquiries, they move the system. And so I think we need to do a better job of making sure that the constituents in our district have access to their representatives when they need help or when you have a substantive question. So that's why we're here today, to answer lots of questions. We're taking questions online, so if you have a question, you can just type it in and we'll answer it. We're going to do a little bit of grouping of the questions just to keep things organized, but we are going to take all of them, so feel free to ask anything. All right, let's do this.
Okay, first question. How does your forest policy differ from Tom McClintock's? And what about fire prevention?
Those are both great questions. So for starters, I think that we need to be adequately funding the Forest Service, not systematically defunding them and depriving them of the resources that they need to do their job effectively. That's really important for healthy forest management, also for creating some jobs in our community here. You know, McClintock, I mean, he's got one of the worst environmental records in Congress, which I think is a tragedy and a crime. When it comes to forest policy in particular, which is linked up with fire prevention, he thinks that we can log our way out of fire danger and supports allowing really large-scale logging projects with minimal environmental review, in theory because that's going to prevent fires. That's just not right. You know, I'm a person who really believes in evidence and science, and if we look at the types of threats that we're seeing in terms of fires, a lot of the most serious fires recently haven't even been coming from areas where that kind of large-scale logging would be possible or would make sense. So I think we need to be really smart about investing in fire prevention, which means fuel reduction. It means really focusing on communities. So I think that we need to flip around the way we think about fire prevention and really start with where the people are and where the structures are and the communities are, and then work our way outward. So I'm in favor of creating new incentives to allow people to update their residences, for example, put on that fire-resistant roof, do fire-resistant siding, make some of the other changes that we know can help structures survive if there is a fire. And again, investing in prevention. So there are some bills out there right now that would propose to do exactly that. Unfortunately, McClintock's not supporting them because he's just clinging to his emphasis on logging. And I think that's wrong. You know, this is an area where he's actually preventing the kind of progress that would benefit our community.
Great. Can you explain in layman's terms the cap and trade climate change solution you support?
Absolutely. So this is actually something that sets me apart from everyone else running in this district right now. I think a lot of candidates agree that climate change is happening and that it has negative consequences for our district. I'm the only person running who's consistently had a view about what we should do about greenhouse gas emissions at the federal level. Here in California, there is a system of cap and trade already, which I support leaving in place. I think California has made some great strides. But I'm running for a federal office, and we need to do more at the federal level to curb greenhouse gas emissions. So I actually prefer and support a carbon fee and dividend program at the federal level, similar to James Baker's plan. You know, this is a market-based approach. So in short, what it does is requires essentially polluters to pay fees for the carbon emissions that they're putting out into the atmosphere. and then returns that money back to consumers, back to normal people, in the form of a check, literally a check. I mean, the average American family of about 4 people would get back around $2,000 a year under this plan. Because it's true that some things that you're buying that are very carbon intensive would be more expensive, right? Because there would have to be more costs associated with their production. But what this means is people who don't consume very much, who maybe are lower or middle income, they would generally come out on top. This would generally benefit them because they're getting back their dividend in this program and not consuming a whole lot. Or people who make changes in their lifestyle to have a less carbon-intensive lifestyle. It's going to reward them. It's going to incentivize that kind of behavior. So this is very much a market-based approach. It's got a good amount of support from both Republicans and Democrats. For example, is a matter of active discussion in the Climate Solutions Caucus in Congress, which I would join. And again, I'm really proud to be the only person running who's got a clear vision about what we should do about greenhouse gas emissions at the federal level, and the only person who would join the Climate Solutions Caucus if elected. And I think our district deserves a seat at the table where those decisions are being made. Right now we don't have that, and we really need to change that in the future. Okay, Mary's got a follow-up.
Well, just, can you explain what the Carbon Solution
Caucus?
Oh, the Climate Solutions Caucus?
Yes.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that this group is not perfect. There are some people in there with real checkered records who are at least willing to have a conversation, though, about finding some kind of action that we should take at the federal level to deal with climate change. So the group as a whole doesn't have any specific policy position it supports right now, but it's basically a group of legislators that want to take action at the federal level to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And it's half Republicans and half Democrats. So if you're going to join, you actually have to go recruit, in my case, I have to go recruit a Republican to join at the same time. And we're lucky that there are some reasonable, moderate, pro-environment, pro-science Republicans running in a number of districts across the country. So my fingers are crossed that at least one of them gets elected and that I get elected, and then we can go join it together to keep it balanced, Republicans and Democrats. But my view, at least currently looking at Congress, is if we're going to see any major legislation at the federal level to deal with greenhouse gas emissions, I think it's going to come out of that group. And so I think it's really important, again, that we have a voice there. I mean, we have a giant ski industry with Lake Tahoe. We have Yosemite. The economy here really is affected by climate change. We have a lot of specialty agriculture and high-value agriculture that isn't going to have the same value in the future if the climate changes. I was just out with some mandarin producers and mandarin growers down in the Newcastle area, and if they don't have the nice crisp nights that they need, the satsumas that come from our region won't have this characteristic kind of sweet tart flavor that they have. It'll just feel like your random grocery store orange. And so this really matters. It matters for our economy, and it matters for our way of life. And again, I would definitely want to join that group and be part of the conversation.
This question says, the national debt is a concern of mine. What can you or we do to ease out of this rising debt situation?
That's a great question, and I know that fiscal responsibility is really important to a lot of people here in our district. Tom McClintock campaigns on being a fiscal conservative, but if we look at what he's actually doing right now, he supports spending taxpayer dollars on Trump's trips to Mar-a-Lago. He supports spending, again, our dollars, building a border wall that, as somebody who's worked in immigration, I can tell you, is a waste of money. And I think worst of all, he ultimately voted for the GOP tax bill last year, which is exploding our national debt and returning very little to most working and middle class families as a result. So I think we absolutely need to make some changes to the changes that were just passed. We need to get large corporations and the very wealthy paying their fair share. We also need to actually pass budgets, and so think in a long-term way about smart investments that are going to save us money down the road. I mean, right now, we are just careening from continuing resolution to continuing resolution. We're not thinking in terms of long-term planning about ways that we could evaluate our current spending for different agencies and programs, and again, make investments, but with an eye to saving money down the road. So I think those are both things that we can change and really passing budgets and having those hard conversations up front, rather than just allowing spending to continue and continue and continue, is important. And that's one of the reasons why I support the No Budget, No Pay Act, which says that if Congress doesn't pass a budget and the related appropriations bills on time, they shouldn't get paid. I would love to know what Tom McClintock thinks of that. Does he have a reason why he thinks Congress should get paid when they don't do their job? Next time you see him, please ask him if he ever dares to venture up here and you get to pose any questions to him.
This may be a follow-up to your conversation right now that you're having, but it says McClintock claims he's fiscally conservative, but his record says he's not. How can you use that against him?
Yes, that's a really good follow-up. I completely agree with the sentiment to that question. I always like to say McClintock says he's fiscally conservative. He's actually fiscally irresponsible for a number of the reasons we just listed out. It's also worth emphasizing that this is someone who is so opposed to any government spending that, for example, he thought that the Violence Against Women Act, when it was up for renewal, was just a feel-good measure that's a waste of government money. He's voted against funding for the federally subsidized school lunch program. He's voted against support for and incentives for rural broadband expansion. It doesn't matter how much something is going to benefit people here. His approach is no. Even a Republican who's a local elected official said to me the other day, if you talk to McClintock, you just get back no. No, no, no. We should not do anything. There is almost no role for government. And, even this person who's a Republican said, the conversation should really be how. If we've got goals, how do we get there? And then that's a reasonable conversation you can have. And so when it comes to McClintock, that's really his posture. And yet, he has essentially lived his entire adult life on the government payroll. He is a career politician. He has never had another job outside of politics, and that's why he's in office right now. He came over here and ran for Congress because he was being termed out of the state legislature. And, what do you do if you're a career politician? You go try to find some other office to seek. So I think that, the other thing I would point out in the Department of Hypocrisy is, and there's a lot there, it's a long list, is that McClintock is actually taking a state pension right now while serving us in Congress. So he's getting not one but two sets of government payments right now, and yet can't seem to be bothered to either do his job and provide good services to people in our district, or provide any kind of government funding or support or investments for other things that really make sense for our region.
Okay, well, this question's written in Spanish, but I had a little in high school, so I'm going to try. It's about DACA, and it says, what do you think, what kinds of solutions are you looking for the Dreamers?
Okay. So, all right. So first I just wanted to say I think something really important that I bring to the race as a candidate and would bring to office as a representative is the fact that I speak Spanish pretty well.
Oh, you could read the question.
Yeah. All right.
She was itching to get it.
Okay, so it says, Regina, ¿es DACA una de las causas que te gustaría apoyar? Is DACA one of the causes that you'd like to support? ¿Y de qué forma lo harías? And in what way would you do it? ¿Buscarías una mejor solución para los Dreamers? Would you look for a better solution for the Dreamers? Okay, so first I'll say that, again, as I was saying, I think speaking Spanish is a really important asset. I see Mary Coons.
I just wondered if the question was written in Spanish, if you should answer it in Spanish.
Maybe,
I'll
maybe
do
both.
the same thing. I'll do both.
Yeah.
I'll do both. I'll do a little bit of both. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background that I actually give a lot of credit to our public schools here for having helped me to be an exchange student in high school. So I went off to Argentina when I was in high school, and that was when I started learning Spanish a bit better. And I always just thought it was really important to be able to communicate with as many people as possible in our community here. And then later I ended up living in Central America and doing volunteer interpreting for legal aid clinics here. And so that's to say that I think, especially in this area here, having a representative who wants to be in dialogue with the Spanish-speaking community is a good thing. Okay, Entonces, hablando de DACA, sí, claro, es una de las causas más importantes ahora para nuestra comunidad. Yo apoyo un Clean Dream Act. Creo que debería ser una de las primeras prioridades cuando llego al Congreso. So I'm saying that I would definitely think this is an important cause. I support a Clean Dream Act. It should be one of the top priorities when I get to Congress. And then the question is asking, ¿y de qué forma lo harías? Pues yo creo que un Dream Act, un Clean Dream Act, debe ser aparte de todo lo demás que estamos hablando en el Congreso. So I think the Dream Act should be separate from everything else we're talking about in Congress. Y no ayuda meterlo allí con otras cuestiones, and it doesn't help to tie it up with other issues because that's impeding the ability to move forward with it. Y pues, bueno, es una lástima que sabemos que la mayoría de los ciudadanos aquí en nuestro país apoyan un Clean Dream Act. This is a shame because we know that a majority of citizens in our country support the idea of a Clean Dream Act. El apoyo sí está allí. Lo que no está serían tener los representantes que necesitamos aquí en el Congreso. So the support's there. What we don't have is the representatives we need in Congress. And the real problem is that even in Congress, they haven't allowed a Clean Dream Act out of committee and really brought it up for a vote in the House. And that's something we can change if we change the control of Congress. Entonces lo que necesitamos hacer es cambiar el poder ahí en el Congreso. Si cambiamos a los demócratas, entonces sí vamos a poder tener un voto para un Clean Dream Act. So if we change who holds power in Congress, then we'll be able to have a vote on a Clean Dream Act. Sí, pero para mí eso es muy importante. So for me this is very important. Y siempre quiero decirles a la comunidad hispanohablante aquí que para mí sus derechos son muy importantes y sus oportunidades son muy importantes. Y yo entiendo que ustedes merecen el respeto y son una parte importante de la comunidad aquí. So I understand that everybody who speaks Spanish is an important part of the community here, and your rights are important to me, and it's important to me to have good opportunities in life.
Much better than what I was saying. This is a little bit of a follow-up.
Okay.
How do you suggest we get Latinos to come out and vote in this election?
Okay, that's a very important question. So I think throwing in a little Spanglish always helps, hopefully. But seriously, working through community leaders is very important. And that's why I'm proud to have been in touch with, and really grateful to have been in touch with a number of community leaders, community organizers, business owners here, because we have to understand that people are busy, right? And I think the most effective way to reach out to them and get them engaged, and to do so respectfully, is, frankly, not saying, hey, maybe you're working a lot, you're busy with your family, come out at 6:30 on a weeknight and come to some event. I think it's much better to meet people where they're at. So to go out to, I went to one of the family rooms at one of the schools, go out to people in their workplaces, go out to the places where people already are and try to engage with them that way. But I also think working through community leaders, churches, business owners, folks who are respected in the community is really important. And not overlooking the importance of high school students. So I was really lucky to get to visit the Fuerza Latina group at the high school here, probably a couple months ago now. It's been a long time. But our high school students can pre-register to vote, and a number of our high school students are doing that. And they're also really good ambassadors to then go home and talk to the rest of their relatives and say, hey, this person turned up at my school today. Let's figure out who else is eligible to vote here. Let's make sure everybody's registered and everybody's getting educated about the election. And that when a young person gets excited about something and motivated, and they're just not going to let it go. I mean, they'll pester you forever about it. So that's what we need to use to our advantage. And I think really make some of those younger folks who maybe have spent more time in the U.S. or their entire lives in the U.S., try to get them acting kind of as ambassadors going back to the rest of their relatives. I see a follow-up question from
Yeah, it's not much of a question, but I'm a dreamer myself, and I've endorsed Regina Bateson for Congress just because I feel like she has the best solution. She's able to explain the situation much better in Congress, which we're missing today. But also, I want to point out that I live in Auburn, and it's kind of interesting. I'm volunteering for the campaign, but I've had multiple family members from Sierra College to Auburn say, hey, they tell me about Regina Bateson all the time. A volunteer came up to me, someone came to speak in my class, and so to me as a volunteer, and this is my own family that I speak out to about this, but there's still other people that haven't heard too much. I really find it that Regina's campaign is reaching out to Latinos in different areas, and so I think it's very positive, and that's what we need to do. And she is right about reaching out to leaders in the community, because a lot of Latinos in the community don't know who to trust. You may have, even though your parents may be undocumented, your children that are just turning 18 are going to vote. And so it's important to reach the whole family, really, and because we don't know who to trust, so that's why we need to hear about it. And her suggestion, going directly to the people, to them, and not expecting them to come out, is exactly the right solution that I find to get Latinos out to vote and win this district.
Thank you, Tomas.
Okay, great. This question says, things seem so toxic in Washington. What is your strategy to navigate successfully through rigid party lines?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, when people look at Congress, we know that regardless of your party, most Americans look at Congress and see total dysfunction. Just complete and total gridlock and dysfunction. And I mean, I always say you wouldn't run your household this way, you wouldn't tolerate this kind of behavior and inefficiency from people in your business. So why are we tolerating it in Congress? And I think part of the problem is that there are so many career politicians who are just completely entrenched there. But if we send the same people back, we're just going to get the same results over and over and over again. Things are not going to change. And that's where I think 2018 is this amazing possibility, because there are lots of normal people running for Congress all over the country. I mean, I'm a pretty normal person. And I can tell you from interacting with other candidates at events, from other districts, I mean, I have a lot of hope and a lot of optimism. And historically, the kinds of people who run for Congress actually have been lifelong politicians. I mean, sort of the way we got Tom McClintock, or a lot of lawyers. No offense to lawyers, but there's a lot of lawyers in Congress already. And this year, we've got doctors, we have scientists. I'm a researcher and a data-oriented person also. I think we have a lot of people running who are a little bit less rigidly ideological in their outlook, and hopefully more open to a conversation about evidence-based policymaking. I'm a very pragmatic person. I really care about what's going to do the most good for the most people in the shortest amount of time. And I think that's the way we should approach policy conversations. And I'm encouraged and heartened that I think there are a lot of other similar-minded people running across the country right now. Whole lot of Democrats in that camp, few reasonable Republicans here or there, although not in our district. I think that changing the composition of who's in Congress is going to help. But I also think we need to build up institutions and groups that are specifically targeted toward having that respectful dialogue. That's part of why I think the Climate Solutions Caucus is a good idea. It's something I'd want to join and grow. There's also a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is half Republicans, half Democrats. And they don't take a position on every issue, but when there's something important for the functioning of our country and just for good governance, that is a group of people that's already agreed, hey, we should have a conversation. And they don't always come to an agreement or a plan exactly, but they have had an important role in pushing forward good proposals to resolve some gridlock. The issue for them right now is they're just not big enough. Their numbers are not big enough in Congress right now relative to the Congress as a whole and relative to much more extreme groups. So I think that growing the numbers of people in groups like that, where you're agreeing that you want to have a conversation, you want to hear both sides, I think it matters.
Yeah, I think this next question is along those rigid party lines as well, so we'll go ahead and ask it. What are your views on gun control? Are you willing to work to bridge the current gap in Republican versus Democrat politics?
Yeah, so I actually think this is just a matter of common sense. I don't think it necessarily has to break down on rigid party lines. But when it comes to gun safety, I think it's clear that we need to do more in our country. We need to do more to keep our kids safe. We need to do more to protect public safety. While at the same time, I want to make it very clear that I respect the Second Amendment and respect the rights of responsible gun owners here in our district. So we got to have a balance. At the federal level, I support universal background checks. I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. More than 90% of Americans agree. And this is where it actually crosses lines more than you might think. I mean, even about 74% of NRA members agree with the idea of universal background checks at the federal level. That's especially salient, I think, right here, because we're very close to Nevada. And I'll tell you, California already has a pretty robust background check system, but we need to take those protections and extend them. And Nevada's right there. I mean, just about anybody can buy almost anything in Nevada. And Nevada's one of the top exporters of crime guns, meaning guns that are used in crimes in other states. So I think there is a really compelling argument to need to extend those background checks nationwide. I also support reviving the federal assault weapons ban. And I think that Tom McClintock on these issues, again, it's not just a simple matter of partisanship, because even as far as Republicans go, he's really on an extreme. He takes some of the largest sums of NRA money of any legislator, and it shows in the legislation he's pursuing. So he's co-sponsored legislation to remove restrictions around the sale of silencers. He also wants to make it easier for people to buy armor-piercing bullets. Those are both moves that are opposed by police chiefs nationwide. And so in my mind, I think, we should listen to our law enforcement. We shouldn't be pushing legislation that's going to make them in more jeopardy when they're out doing their jobs. On the silencers bill, they're explicitly concerned that it could increase ambush killings of police officers and make it harder for them to respond if there is, unfortunately, some kind of shooting incident they're having to respond to. So I think McClintock is really on a fringe of his own party and pushing an agenda that makes us less safe. And again, we need to move in the opposite direction and take some common sense measures to protect our safety.
Sure, let's do an online question. What will you do for the 4th district if elected? What's your plan?
Okay, that's a big question. Real fast. So I think, first of all, like I said, being really responsive to the constituents here and being a good partner for local government, I think is really important. And that might not sound exciting and flashy, but it's not happening right now. And we need it if we want our district to be able to keep progressing. In terms of priorities, I think it's really important to emphasize the actual tangible well-being of people in our district, really focusing on people's economic well-being. So if we're talking about protecting Social Security and Medicare for our seniors, making sure we're supporting small businesses here in the district so they can be creating jobs, people can be keeping their jobs, standing up for our community colleges. I'm proud to be the only person running who's endorsed Measure E, which would allow the other campus of Sierra College down in Rockland to do some just critically needed modernization of its facilities. So I think that really focusing on job creation, supporting small business, that entails some improvements to infrastructure. So we know that rural broadband is a big problem for people in the district. I can't make this up. I was just at Sierra College in Rockland before I came here and was talking to some students and somehow mentioned rural broadband, and somebody practically jumped out of her chair. She said, yeah, I can't do my homework. And she's not far. She's not far out into a rural area at all. She's actually in a part of Loomis and just has abysmal internet at her house. And that's the case for most rural residents in our district. So, even in Placer and El Dorado counties, the majority of rural residents cannot get high-speed internet at any price. It just doesn't matter what you're willing to pay. You cannot access the modern economy. You cannot access online education. You're not going to be able to access, if you ever want to do telemedicine or even sometimes for mental health, people do remote counseling and things like that. For seniors, and we have a lot of seniors in our district, it can really help with social isolation to be able to Skype with your grandkids. It's precisely people out in more rural areas that need that connectivity. And we should be doing more. McClintock has voted against federal support for rural broadband twice, and I think that's wrong. So I would really be focused on those kind of tangible improvements that we need to empower people here, to allow them to keep pushing forward and progressing and starting their small businesses and, really living that American dream, trying to build a better life.
Are the voters in Truckee different from voters in other parts of the district?
Well, I think you guys in the room are the experts on this question. But from my perspective, looking at data, interacting with people across the district, I can tell you yes. And there's an important way from my perspective that you're different, which is that a lot of you are Democrats. And this is actually the Democratic stronghold of the district, is the Truckee and the Tahoe area more broadly. And so that's why I think our challenge here as a campaign is a little bit different than our challenge other places. We do a lot of persuasion in maybe Roseville, southern parts of our district, Eldorado Hills. Here I think the challenge is turnout. I think that a good number of people would agree they want Tom McClintock gone. They want to replace him with somebody who's much better on the environment, somebody who understands and cares about affordable housing, somebody who's really going to try to work to help small businesses in the region here. The issue is that some people travel a lot who live here or bounce around from one housing situation to the next. They might not be registered at the right address right now. They might not be aware that an election is even coming up in June and then again in November. So we really need to work on making sure people are registered at the right addresses, making sure they understand the voting system that's being used this year, which is different than it's been in the past here, in the Truckee area in particular. And they haven't done us any favors splitting that up by county, right? Because we've got a situation where people in Tahoe City and Kings Beach are voting in one way, and then Truckee, has its voting centers and everybody getting their vote by mail ballot and mail. So we really need to be, I think, communicating with people clearly here about how to vote, where to vote, when to vote, and making sure that we get turnout up here in June and again in November.
Well, there are 3 serious candidates for Congress for this district. Why should I vote for you? What's the most compelling reason?
All right, that's a great question. I would say that I'm local, so I grew up here in the district. I'm really loyal to people here in the district. In answer to you, I'm proud to have done the highest percentage of our fundraising in district of anyone who's running, and also to be raising the highest percentage of money from small dollar donors. And again, why that matters is about loyalty and accountability once you're in office. So if you really want to break through that partisan gridlock in DC, you want to change from politics as usual that's dominated by special interests and sort of fancy outside groups, I'm the person who is most capable of doing that and making that promise to you. And I really care about accountability and transparency also. That's why we're having this event here today, and we'll continue to be accessible and answering to you in the future. I'm really proud of my qualifications. I think I have the right balance of these local roots and connections and really caring about the district, but also having national and international experience and accomplishments, including having worked in government before for the State Department. And then in terms of policy priorities, I really care again about getting practical results for people here. I'm a very pragmatic person. Tom McClintock gave this interview to the Press Tribune in Roseville recently, where they were asking him essentially, how do you judge success? How do you know if you're doing a good job in office? And he basically said that he tries to evaluate if he's being consistent to his ideological principles or not. That's not the standard I'd use. My standard would be, am I doing everything possible to actually help make life better in our district? To help people accomplish what it is they want to accomplish, to help see our region continuing to progress. And that's really the orientation that I bring to the race.
Woohoo!
Okay,
You mentioned that you worked in the State Department, and I knew that, but I would like to know more about what you did and why you did that, and what your job was and why you were involved in that.
That's actually similar to an online question.
Okay, go for that.
Okay,
That
let's do
says,
it.
well, I'll just read it because
Sure.
it says, what aspects of your foreign service experience will you draw on as a representative in Congress, particularly with regards to immigration issues in this region, which you spoke to a little bit. But maybe we just want to hear more about your foreign service and what's going on there. How you can
Great.
draw on that experience.
Great, so I think I'll try to tackle both questions at once and talk a bit about, first what the Foreign Service is, why I joined it and how, what I did there, and then how that contributes to some of the knowledge I bring to the race now. So, for me, 9/11 happened when I was in college. It was when I was just starting my sophomore year of college. And I think especially because I was kind of a young adult then, it really shaped my worldview and, really kind of changed some of my priorities. I always cared about engagement. I mean, I'd been an exchange student in high school. But my natural reaction was to think that, the way we break down barriers, the way we ratchet down tensions is by communication, it's by dialogue, it's by diplomacy. And so I ended up being interested in joining the Foreign Service, basically as a result of 9/11. And even the first year after 9/11 happened, I actually took Arabic for a year in college. Now, I don't bring this up very often because I don't actually speak Arabic. It's important to emphasize that. Turns out I'm really good at Spanish, not good at Arabic, which is a very difficult language. I have a lot of respect for anybody who's managed to learn it as not a native speaker. But that was really the approach that I took, right? Was wanting to learn and understand and communicate. And so I did go ahead and take the Foreign Service exam the very earliest I could after 9/11 happened. And you have to be 20 years old, actually, to take the Foreign Service exam. So I turned 20 the next summer. We took the Foreign Service exam in September of 2002, and I actually passed. And this is hard to do. People spend a lot of time studying for the Foreign Service exam, the first written exam that you take. It's kind of notoriously tricky. I joke that it's like Trivial Pursuit meets the SAT or something. But I just went and did it. I mean, I've never been a person to shy away from big challenges. And so I actually ended up passing on the first try. And then, this is the government. It takes a long time to work your way through this process. So basically, you take one exam, and then I had to wait months to find out if I passed. And I did, and then they assigned me to go take this oral exam, this oral assessment in Washington, D.C. the next summer. So July 2003, I went to Washington, D.C. And did the oral assessment to join the Foreign Service. And one of the stranger experiences of my life. I'll tell you, I've had some weird experiences being a candidate. This one still takes the cake. Just a very bizarre and stressful day. So essentially, people go to Washington, D.C., they walk you through this big kind of bureaucratic sort of building, and then plop you in a room, and you don't know the people who are in your group. I was by far the youngest person, at least I think I was. So there were people there who were up into probably their 50s, every other age in between. And you have to do some individual tasks, you do some group tasks, you have to work together to solve problems. Back then you did a timed writing exercise also. It's very stressful. And there's people standing in the corners of the room or sitting in the corners of the room watching you, taking notes about everything you're doing. You can't tell if you're doing what they want you to do, not doing what they want you to do. I just tried to approach it being myself. Hope for the best. And at the end of the day, they tell you if you passed or not. So they actually make you kind of sit in a little waiting room with chairs. They call people in one at a time. You don't know what's going to happen. And it turned out that I was one of very few people from my group that passed, despite being the youngest person there. And so at that point, then to actually become a Foreign Service officer, you have to get a top secret security clearance and a medical clearance. And that takes quite a while. I'd already been to Argentina, I had been to Chile in college, where I worked abroad for a summer. I had done a variety of other things. So they have to actually investigate your whole background. I heard there were people running around rural Chile asking what I'd been doing there for a summer. People went out to my high school. People there still remember this. If you run into Ron Severson, he got interviewed back then, who had been my high school principal, said I'm a person of good character. I mean, it's actually a pretty exhaustive investigation of your background. And so I moved along in the security clearance process. It took me quite a while to get a medical clearance, actually, because I have this bone disease, this genetic bone disease I talk about sometimes. So we did that. And then finally, by June 2004, I had all those clearances, and they actually offered me a spot to start in September that year, in September 2004. So that was how I ended up joining. And initially I was really interested in public diplomacy, exchange programs, sort of bringing people together in dialogue. They ended up putting me into consular work, which was fine with me. And so I went to Washington, D.C., did the basic orientation, did the consular training, which at the time was really focused on preventing terrorists from entering the U.S. I mean, 9/11 was very fresh in people's minds. The 9/11 Commission had come out with its reports not too long before. And so we really walked through even the terrorists, the 9/11 hijackers' visa applications, looking at what the officers were annotating on the margins when they were interviewing these people. And it was absolutely drilled into us, you don't want to be this person. You do not want to be the person who interviews someone in the future who turns out to be a terrorist and makes the wrong call. And so we got a lot of training in that area. Then I went off to Guatemala, in part because I speak Spanish pretty well. And so I did visa interviews there. I also did some American Citizen Services, which is helping Americans who have serious problems abroad. So, I don't know, how many of you have been on a trip abroad? I'm curious, been out of the U.S.? All right, I hope that none of you had an occasion to meet an American Citizen Services officer, because that would mean that maybe your passport got lost, or maybe something much more serious happened. So in Guatemala, there's a lot of violent crime. So I was going out and helping people who had been victims of violent crimes. In a couple of cases dealing with the aftermath of homicides. We had other serious medical emergencies. We needed to medevac people back to the U.S. And so I guess this kind of gets to the second part of the question. That really taught me to find solutions to problems fast and work with almost anybody, and really assess a situation and come up with a solution and implement it. And have to do that really independently, thinking on your feet in a foreign language, sometimes under hard circumstances. And so I think that did teach me a lot of problem-solving skills that I carry with me to this day. But on the immigration side, I think the visa work that I did there was really important. And that's a perspective we don't have in Congress right now. I mean, I think part of the reason the immigration system is so broken is because there's nobody in Congress, nobody, who's ever issued or denied a visa. I mean, there's nobody who's actually clicked through and used our background check systems. At one point, I took the Dream Act Now challenge in the fall, and I actually called up Tom McClintock's office. You can look on our YouTube channel if you want to see a video of me doing this. I called up his office, and in addition to asking him to pass a clean Dream Act, which, of course he didn't listen, I also asked his staff. I said, has Representative McClintock ever been out to a consular section? Has he ever been to a port of entry? Has he ever actually sort of seen the immigration system in action? The answer was basically no. The only thing they could come up with was that he'd been out to a naturalization ceremony once, which that's the end of the process. That's not actually the process itself. And I think that's reflective pretty broadly of who's in Congress right now. So I think that is a really important experience that I would bring, and really being able to talk through the different categories of visas. And I can very credibly say to people who are concerned about having a secure border, who are concerned about immigration enforcement, yeah, great, let's talk about enforcement. I mean, I've done that. I've denied visas to thousands of people who unfortunately didn't meet the requirements of our laws. But I've also been in the position of enforcing laws that don't always make sense and aren't always good, for the economic interests of our country, aren't always fair to the people who are applying in the first place. And I can see where we need to make some changes, and I'm going to be a leader in that area.
This one's kind of interesting. It says, what will McClintock say? How will he attack you? And how will you defend yourself if things get ugly?
All right. I think the only one thing that McClintock will say that's more specific to me, but that just seems glaringly obvious is, oh, overeducated liberal elite. I think that's just definitely coming. So I see somebody mouthing woman. Well, we'll get to that in a second. Sure, I hadn't really thought about that, but that's an interesting one. So in terms of overeducated liberal elite, I really try to emphasize being engaged with the community here and being out there doing things that are hands-on that I actually believe Tom McClintock has never done. So, I was sticking my hand into a giant pile of compost recently out at the Mandarin Grove and feeling how warm it was right there in the middle of the pile. And of course we made a video of this. We're going to put it on social media soon. You can see within the next week or two. I've been going out and visiting all different workplaces across the district. I went to Mountain Forge at one point here in Truckee and did some blacksmithing and really tried to learn about the work that was happening. I went out to Aero Metals in El Dorado Hills recently and got to see some of the advanced machining and talked with some of the folks that are working there about how they got into those jobs and what other support they need. And I'll tell you, this affordable housing thing is not limited to Truckee. That was actually one of the top issues that came up over there also, is that they have people doing long and crazy commutes to get to work who have really good jobs but actually can't afford to live in the community they're working in either. So I think that being really hands-on, and showing that engagement and respect to people in a proactive way is something that I'm already doing to try to counteract this idea that I'm some sort of out of touch liberal elite. I think that actually describes, well, not the liberal part, but the out of touch elite part actually describes McClintock much better when we're talking about this district here. All right, so I saw somebody who, I'm curious, can I put you on the spot? What is it that you think Tom McClintock would say about the fact that I'm a woman?
Well, that you're out of touch with people who really have to support themselves and who don't have families to support and have all the anti-feminist issues about they're just mothers and not really serious people out in the world. They vote the way their husbands tell them to vote. All the second-class citizenship.
All right, there's a lot there. So the first thing I would say is that, I think a real strength of mine is to recognize that women are really important contributors to the economic well-being of their families, and in some cases are the sole breadwinners or the primary breadwinners for their families. We have a lot of single parents in our district, some of whom are women and are actually working their tails off to take care of their kids, juggle 1,000 things, work one job or 1.5 jobs or more. And so I think that if McClintock started saying things like that, I actually think it would be the nail in the coffin for him because that's radically out of step with the reality for most families here in our district. And I think it's actually a really important perspective that I bring. I think that working parents are wildly underrepresented in government right now. I was reading something that until the 1980s, there were no members of Congress who had ever had a working spouse and young children, or had had a sort of a 2 working parent family and young children. There was nobody in Congress who had ever had that experience. And that blows my mind, and it hasn't really changed that much since. Especially when we're talking about women. There are actually rather few women who are parents of school-aged children or young children who are in Congress. And to clear up a common misperception, that is not because voters penalize mothers. It's because we just don't have enough women who are mothers, especially of younger and school-aged children, stepping up to run and being able to make it work. Because it is very challenging. And I'm really grateful to my own parents who are in Roseville, who do a ton to help us with our kids. I'm very grateful to my own husband, who is very much a co-equal partner in this race. He's not here right now because he's actually taking care of our children at this moment. But he is very engaged with the campaign and really feels that supporting me and doing this is his contribution that he can make right now at this critical time. I'm very grateful to our volunteers, to other friends in the community. I have an aunt and uncle who live fairly nearby also. But it really does take a village. And it is hard and daunting for someone, I think especially someone who's a mother with younger children, to take this on and to get to this point. That is why women with younger and school-age children are underrepresented in government. And that is part of why this race is really important. It's important for our district. It is important that we get Tom McClintock out of office. But I think it's also an important opportunity for us to change the composition of who's representing us in Congress. Because, that lack of perspective is part of the reason why we have the social policies that we do in this country. People don't have the experience of understanding how expensive daycare really is right now. They don't have the experience of understanding even little things like how school schedules make it hard for people to have jobs. I mean, it's just, and I think we need that. So I'll tell you that I wish we lived in a world where, I could just be putting my feet up, relaxing in my house right now, playing with my kids, watching as we had excellent leaders in office and they had excellent role models and all their rights were respected. And I knew that funding was secure for our public schools and they had great health insurance. I mean, I wish we lived in that world, but we don't. And so for me, frankly, this is something that's hard. It is something that's a bit of a sacrifice, but it's something I've decided is important. It's important to do for my kids and for other kids and for other working families. So that would be my response to Tom McClintock. And I think that, that's actually part of how we can win in this district too. Because we need to break down some of the partisan math. And we've only got 29% Democrats. But we have a whole lot of working families. And we have a whole lot of women. And I think it's really important to be talking to both those groups of people and to be doing so in a really respectful, engaged way. That's something that I bring to the table. There were other parts of the question. I don't want to break our format too much, but I do see somebody who's excited here.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do one more comment and then we'll go back to the format.
Will you just mention about your percentage of gifting for women?
Sure. So I'm in the category of gratefulness and expressing some gratitude. I'm really grateful to all the women who've stepped up and gotten involved in our campaign. Very grateful to the men who are volunteers also and contributors. We've got some great men here who are involved. But we really do have an extraordinary number of women as volunteers and as donors. And I was actually very surprised to learn recently that our campaign is among the top 10 House campaigns nationally that are raising the highest percentage of money from women. So we've really been demonstrating a lot of success. I think we've been demonstrating a lot of success in winning the trust and confidence of women in particular, and also, getting people involved in the political process who, maybe aren't kind of big traditional donors, because even Democratic women who run for Congress usually only raise, right now, in this election cycle, about 44% of their money from women, and we're up at, I believe, 57 or 58%. Which is right on par with Kirsten Gillibrand, Elizabeth Warren, some other really kind of high-profile, effective advocates for women. So I think we're in really good company, and I'm really grateful to all of our contributors who've made that, made that the case and stepped up and contributed to the campaign. Okay, we're gonna go back to the format. Thank you for your patience, Whitney.
Okay, great. This is coming from somebody online. It says, are you worried about splitting the Democratic vote in the primary and potentially sending 2 Republicans on to the general election? Oh, wait, there's more.
Okay.
What happened to your January pledge to withdraw if someone else received the Democratic nomination?
Okay, is that all?
Mm-hmm.
All right, sounds good. So there's 2 questions there. The first one has a really easy answer. Am I worried about splitting the Democratic vote in June and sending 2 Republicans to the November election? No, not at all. You should not be worried about that either. If someone tries to tell you that, they are fear-mongering to you, and they are not giving you real information from the real world. Because here's what's real. There is only one viable Republican candidate in our district, and that is Tom McClintock. You'll notice, if you look at the Sacramento Bee's endorsement column they wrote for our district, they didn't even interview or make any reference to this Mitchell White, who's the other Republican who's running here. And that's because he's not a viable candidate. He's raised less than $10,000, he has no staff, he has no campaign. You'll notice that there's an ocean of signs around town here, right? I mean, it's almost to the point of litter. Has anyone seen a single Mitchell White sign?
No.
And he's to the right of McClintock, right?
And he is to the right of McClintock, to the extent that matters. But what really matters is that he's 26 years old, he has no political experience, he has no endorsements, he has no fundraising. He's essentially not running a campaign. There is no universe in which Tom McClintock and Mitchell White go into the November election. The only question is, which Democrat goes along with Tom McClintock? And I think that we should be thinking about the big picture here, which is beating Tom McClintock. And we need to be smart and make sure we're putting our best foot forward and sending the person on out of the June election who has the best chance to beat him in November. And I'm really proud to have earned the endorsement of the Sacramento Bee and the Modesto Bee in this race, both of which have concluded that I'd actually be the candidate that would give McClintock the toughest battle in November. So that actually gets to the second part of the question. Why not drop out after the California Democratic Party endorsed someone else in this race? So I fully acknowledge that, like every other candidate in this race, I had previously said that if someone else was endorsed by the party, that I would end my campaign and get out of the race. I also completely acknowledge that, like every other candidate in the race, I changed my mind about that. I changed my mind later than they did, actually because I had more faith in the process. You know, I've been a Democrat or involved in Democratic politics for most of my life. When our clubs said they were going to do a rigorous vetting of our candidates, I actually believed them, and unfortunately that vetting did not happen. I also thought that our delegates from our district that were being sent to the state convention to decide on an endorsement in the race would take into account the views of the grassroots club members, the actual hundreds and thousands of people who are Democrats in our district. I thought they would take into account the results of the candidates' forums that we'd had up until that point, where people got to vote in straw polls in the audience, and in most cases actually preferred me as the candidate, in some cases by rather wide margins, even in a field of 3 or 4 people at a time. And it was very surprising to me to see that the delegates that went to the state convention acted pretty much in the opposite of that feedback. And that's not a situation that's common. That's not something, I fully admit, that is not something that I expected would happen. Because that's not how the system's supposed to work. Frankly, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it sets up the kind of conflict we see now where some parts of the Democratic Party might have one preference, other kind of grassroots activists have a different preference. I didn't think that was what's going to happen. And to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't happened in another district in our state, this year. Usually the delegates, although they're not required to, they usually act, in accordance with the views of people from their district. Because, let's think about this. We should be in the business of winning. And to do that, it makes sense to listen to the input from actual voters in your district. So after the state convention, I was left with a couple of options, neither of which were good, neither of which were perfect. One option would have been to say to all the hundreds of thousands of people involved in our campaign, to all the people who'd come out to these events and voted after forums and stuff, to say, you tried to make your voice heard, powers that be didn't listen, I can't explain to you why, but we should all just say, tough luck, and kind of move on. Another option was to stay in the race, to tell those people that their voices mattered, and that I respect them, and I think they're actually the pathway to success in November, but to take some heat for that. And I fully accept that if you're in public life and you're running for office and you change your mind about something, people should criticize you for that. And rightly so, and you should be made to explain your decision. But that's exactly what I'm doing right now. So I respect that some people may disagree with this choice, but I want to make sure people understand that my goal here is beating Tom McClintock. And if I thought there was anything about this that was going to harm our chances of doing that, I would have gotten out of the race. But no one has ever been able to make a convincing, fact-based argument, based in the real world, about how me staying in the race harms our chances of beating Tom McClintock. And in fact, again, other folks looking at the race at this point, the SAC B and the Modesto B, actually think that by staying in the race, I've given us our best chance at beating Tom McClintock. So I would say, vote for the candidate you actually prefer in June. There is no risk of sending 2 Republicans on to November in our district. That is a risk other places. So you might read articles in national publications or statewide publications. They're talking about Democrats fearing disaster in California. Oh, there are districts where Democrats should be very concerned right now. But those are places where you have multiple serious, viable Republicans running, multiple office holders, multiple people who have raised hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That's not the case here in our district. So, don't be confused. Don't feel coerced into, anything in June. Just choose the person that you think would do the best job once in office and the best job of beating McClintock in November. I'll take a follow-up question.
Okay. There's a really big block of voters here in this district who are independents. And you're going to have to get those, whether you're McClintock or you, or the Democratic candidate. And most of the Democrats are not going to vote for McClintock, no matter who gets in there. So one of the keys is, how do you go after the independents? And who's the best Democratic candidate to go after those independents? What's your feeling on that?
Yep, you're absolutely right. We really need those nonpartisan voters coming our way in order to win in November. I will say that a concerning number of Democrats in the past have voted for McClintock. We actually have people by the thousands in our district who voted for Hillary Clinton and McClintock in 2016. This is true. There are entire precincts that went Clinton-McClintock. So don't assume that you don't need to talk to your Democratic friends about this race. You need to make sure that they're educated and voting our way as well. But by and large, you are absolutely right that independents, nonpartisan voters are key to this. And in a weird way, I think all this stuff we were just discussing that's happened with the Democratic Party puts me in the best position of any of the challengers to McClintock to win their trust and support and win their votes, and even win over some Republican votes. Because I'm constantly asked, okay, you're saying you're going to be an independent voice for our region, you're saying you're really doing this because you care about what's right for the region, but how can we really believe that? How can we believe you're not just marching to the tune of whatever Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer tell you to do, who are, House Leader and who would be Speaker of the House probably, and the Whip currently. And, I think it's important to have a credible answer to that. And I've actually already shown repeatedly this spring a willingness to do what I think is right, and to make some tough calls and to take some criticism from my own party for doing that. And I think that's the kind of independence that is going to enable us to really talk to those independent voters and even some Republicans. So as a matter of kind of approach and position and style, that's why I think I'm in the best position to do that. I also think I've made the clearest commitments to bipartisanship of anybody who's in the race, by talking about things like the Problem Solvers Caucus, the Climate Solutions Caucus, and we've already seen really good interest from independent and even Republican local office holders and people who are leaders in the community. We had this fantastic event in Loomis recently and had a lot of Republicans out of it. And it's really by winning their trust and their support and then getting them talking to their friends and saying, hey, I know you don't usually vote for a Democrat, but this is a unique situation where, just straight partisanship and what's right for the community are in conflict with each other. Take a look at this really good person that I know who I've met. I think it's really working through kind of social networks like that that's going to be very important for us. And I'll tell you that I was really happy and proud that I've gotten endorsed by some of the members of the Roseville City Council at this point, which is 18% of our district, by the way, is Roseville. But the first person from the City Council there who endorsed me, Dr. Tim Herman, I believe is actually not a Democrat. I believe that he's independent, that he's nonpartisan. And he was the first person to step out and say, no, I actually do want to endorse Regina. And then Scott Alford, who is a Democrat, came and endorsed me second. So we're already building those relationships, and I'm going to continue to do so in the future.
Okay, great. Do you have a position and plan for reducing the influence of special interest money in national politics?
Yes. Step one, don't take it. So seriously, again, I'm really proud to be running a campaign that's very grassroots. We currently have no PAC money. In the future, I'm committed to not taking corporate PAC money and being very selective about any money from allied groups that we might take. You know, Emily's List, if you're listening, I want your support. You know, some of the key environmental groups, I would be proud and honored to have their support. You know, but being very careful about that because I do think that there's absolutely too much influence of special interest money in politics right now. And I think especially when it comes to online advertising, we need a lot more transparency in the way advertising is conducted. I mean, as a candidate, it's honestly been really disturbing to me to see that, you know, if we print handouts or even, you know, other just sort of small materials that reach just a few people, we have to put a disclaimer on there saying who paid for it. Unless we change something in our legislation, right now most digital advertising doesn't have to have a disclaimer. Somebody could be throwing advertising at you and you don't even realize that it's paid for or boosted or this or that. You know, I mean, we have a group in our district right now that's called Sierra Nevada Revolution that's pretty shady, that's engaged in paid online advertising intervening in our race. When they're throwing something at you, you can't tell that that's paid advertising. And so I really do think that we need a lot more transparency in addition to reform and doing everything possible to get that special interest money out of politics.
Well, this next question is kind of fun. It's in two parts. How do you feel about our trading relationship with China? How dangerous is Vladimir Putin?
All right, so how do I feel about our trade relationship with China? You know, I definitely think we need to make sure that American companies are getting a fair deal. And we need to crack down on things like currency manipulation. On the other hand, Trump's approach right now to radically changing trade policy overnight, flipping back again, this is how you destroy our economy. I mean, introducing that much uncertainty is just a terrible business climate. And again, Republicans will claim to be the pro-business party. I don't think so. I think we need consistent, rational, logical leadership to actually have a good business climate in our country. So I really disagree with his approach to trade right now. How dangerous is Vladimir Putin? Extremely dangerous. I think that we need much more aggressive and transparent investigation into Russian interference in our elections in 2016 and probably current ongoing interference. That's why I really support the creation of a bipartisan commission similar to the 9/11 Commission that would, again, really be accountable to the American people and try to make public their reporting and as much of their findings as possible. I think this is incredibly dangerous to have foreign power undermining our democracy in this way. And I'm really proud to be endorsed and supported by Michael McFaul, who was Obama's ambassador to Russia, and is, I think, one of the strongest voices calling for accountability in our country right now, and I completely agree with him.
Some of these, we have been categorizing them, but
Okay.
now we're just kind of getting into some random stuff.
All right, I'll try to go really fast.
Okay.
You guys have been incredibly patient. This has gotten a little
If
bit
you
long.
would have had a chance to confirm Betsy DeVos, would you?
No, that's
And you may have already, we kind of, going around to the beginning of this, you may have already talked a little bit about this. Can you talk to us about your approach to our serious environmental challenges? I know you've already talked about climate change and logging and some things like that.
Yeah, real quickly, I would add clean air and clean water as real priorities. Right now, we're seeing just an absolute, I just think it's absolutely very disturbing to see at the federal level efforts to roll back protections that we've fought for years and years. And, you know, when I started this campaign, some of you may have seen me talk about this last year, I always used to say that there was really only one person out there who wanted us breathing dirtier air, and that was Tom McClintock, because he's been opposed to the federal waiver that allows California to have its better air standards for years, right? Now, unfortunately, he's been joined by other federal officials, basically by Trump himself. And our standards that preserve our clean, healthy way of life here in California are under assault. And again, I challenge anybody to explain why you would want to live in a dirtier, more polluted environment. I certainly don't. And whether we're talking about people with young kids, 2 of our kids who are twins were born slightly premature. You always have to be really careful with breathing for, a lot of little babies and toddlers. Older people need to be able to breathe also. This just really affects everyone, and it seems like a matter of common sense to me. And if you look back at McClintock's record, the reason he's always opposed stronger fuel efficiency standards and stronger standards for clean air in California is that even years ago, we're talking decades ago at the state legislature, he would always say, well, it's going to kill our economy. And that's his answer to everything. Again, it's more fear-mongering. Right? It's just saying, if we do this, the economy's going to collapse. It's going to be a catastrophe. It's like, well, look, we did it, and we know that the economy did not collapse as a result. People could just breathe better. And so I think it's really important not to fall into that trap of that reasoning again, and not to let them roll us back and take us back, to the era of extreme pollution that motivated a lot of people, including Republicans, to get involved in advocacy for a cleaner, safer environment and environmental advocacy in the first place.
Yeah, this is maybe a good one to end. This is a fun one. What would you say is your one tagline if you had just choose 4 words? If you had to just choose 4 words. Okay, maybe we won't hold you to 4 words, but that's hard.
Okay, I think I can come pretty close.
Okay.
I would say stand up for what's right. I think we speak for what's right. It just seems pretty clear. We should do what's right for our community. We should do what's right for our families. We should do what's right for our country, our democracy, at this really pivotal time in history. And I need your help. I need your help to get there. I need everybody to actually stand up and participate and be part of our campaign. So thank you for coming. I'm excited.
There's one last question. It says, how do people volunteer to help the campaign? I know that you can stop at the table in the back. You can donate, of course, always, and volunteer. I'll let you speak to that.
We've really been a volunteer-powered campaign since our very first days. I will tell you now we do have professional staff, and we have built out the kind of infrastructure that we need to make this race very competitive. I think it's constantly a source of bafflement to some of the staff that we brought, how involved volunteers are in our campaign and in the inner workings and kind of back office side of the campaign. I'm not poking fun at you too much. That's our campaign manager, Emma, over there. But, I think it is something consistent that I've heard from everybody that we brought in who has experience in other campaigns. They'll say, we actually have Larry here who's done a lot of the design and administering of our databases that keep track of our contact with everybody that comes out to events. And, so we're such a grassroots campaign that volunteers have always had a lot of responsibility and have done really important, critical things for the campaign, from designing our logo to designing our first website. And, so I really value all the work that everybody's put in as a team effort, and we need you to keep doing that. So right now we are in the phase of primarily trying to get in contact with voters. So doing a lot of door knocking, doing a lot of phone banking. There's an active group here in the Tahoe Truckee area that you can join if you're interested to stay and talk to us. If you're online and watching, you can sign up on our website. Our website is batesonforcongress.com, and there's a volunteer sign up there. We will get back to you if for some reason you don't hear back from us. Just bother us, just hold us accountable, and we will do everything possible to get you connected, either with helping us with some task that fits with your expertise, or helping us in our office in Rockland, or doing outreach in your own community. We really need a lot of different things done, and I think everybody's got some talent to bring to the table right now.
Okay, great, and don't forget to vote on June 5th.
Yes.